Donnie in for Shasky. Big John on the board. We got Lubman back there. We got Joe walking around here giving us all his takes on everything happening. My Florida State Seminoles. I'm going to leave the SEC. Or excuse me, ACC.
Really?
Florida State trustee said it's not a matter of if we leave. It's a matter of how and when we leave.
Wow.
Oh, my Seminoles going to the SEC. It's a big year for Florida State football.
Huge
year.
Do they have legit expectations?
Yes,
for the first time in a long time since Jameis?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. LSU first game. It's like last year.
That'll be fun.
That'll be in Orlando, Florida. This Saturday, the Bay Area Panthers are in an indoor football league title game.
Let's go.
Against the Sioux Falls Storm. Kickoff this Saturday, 1 p.m. You can hear it right here on 95.7 The Game. Although Dave Lewis and Steve Pappen are expected to be on the call this Saturday, Evan Giddings and Mark Grandy have been the voices of the Bay Area Panthers all season long. Indoor Football League title game happening in Henderson, Nevada. And someone who knows about the Arena Football League playing indoors as a corner, also played in the NFL for a cup of coffee, Stockton native. And you know what, man? I don't know who, Grant Cohn, Eric Crocker. Eric Crocker is huge when it comes to Niners coverage. Lockdown 49ers. Of course, the Crock Pot on Twitter. Eric Crocker, he's been at practice, and I know he has no biases when it comes to breaking down everything going on with the 49ers. Last time I saw him, he was out there in Chi-Town, man, looking yoked up like he was about to suit up in Soldier Field. What up, Crocky?
What's up, man? I don't know if I'm going to suit up just yet, but I might have to make a call to Steve Pappen and Coach Arbette over there with the Panthers. They're doing good things, and hopefully they go and win it all in the indoor league.
No doubt, no doubt. Eric Crocker, of course, also worked with Underdog Fantasy Gambling website. Of course, the Stockton David as well. I know you. Are you still out here in the Bay Area right now covering practice?
Yeah. I'm actually headed there right now.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. So, obviously, the quarterback is the talk of the town. We will get into Steve Wilkes and his defense because I feel like we're going to see a more aggressive defense as opposed to what we saw for Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryans. But, obviously, we have to start with the quarterback. So, you're out there. You saw them hitting out there. They were brawling. What's your take on the quarterback so far? Trey Lance, let's start there. Adam Schefter saying that the 49ers believe that he's trending up. Do you believe that Trey Lance is trending up at camp so far?
Yeah, I think he looks good. I haven't seen anything that looks glaringly bad. There were a couple practices I wasn't at where it sounded like those were his worst practices, so I can't speak on those. But for the days that I've been out there, he looks a lot more confident. He looks like he's not as hesitant to pull the trigger. Throwing the ball in those, that 10 to 20-yard range, that's where Kyle Shanahan's bread and butter is of his offense. And, Trey Lance has done a good job of hitting those throws as well. Now, if there's one hiccup with him, and I think everybody's kind of making a big stink out of this, he tends to kind of miss the layups, especially that kind of like boot to the right, guy dragging across the formation with him, and he just might overthrow it somehow. And I don't know why. I've talked to some quarterback guys, whether it's my guy Quincy Avery, my buddy Greg Pinelli, and, hey, how does this happen? And there's a bunch of different reasons. They'd have to actually specifically see the throw. But for the majority of the throws that he's making and how it looks, he looks like he's trending towards what you would want when you think of Trey Lance developing. So I think that's a positive for the 49ers.
What's up, Eric? Joe Spadoni here. What are your thoughts on Brock Purdy? His came on last year, Mr. Irrelevant, took the league by storm, gets hurt in the NFC Championship game. They're bringing him back slowly after UCL surgery here. Kind of a limited arm strength coming out when he came out of Iowa State. And now got surgery there. It's just little shake. I'm a little concerned about him and his size going forward here and an already limited arm becoming more limited. What are your thoughts and expectations for Brock Purdy as he is QB1 heading into this season for the 49ers?
So I'm not concerned with the size. I think there's enough evidence out there with some of these quarterbacks that are a little bit on the smaller side that still do well. And his small is a little different because he's not the tallest guy, but he's built a little thicker. So I think he should be able to hold up, when it comes to getting hit and all those type of things. But, the arm strength, I think that's one of the things where we hear a lot going out there about teams watching film. Okay, the film is out on them. The film is out on them. And you have to wonder, okay, how are defensive coordinators going to try to game plan against Brock? It seemed like he answered the call any way that they tried to attack him last season. But, during the offseason, they'll dive more into it, and they'll start to figure out, all right, where are his limitations? What does he do well or doesn't do well? How is he looking and seeing the field? And they'll just start to try to force him to do things that he's not comfortable doing. Now, with Jimmy Garoppolo, it didn't matter. I think everyone and their mom knew that he was going to attack the middle of the field, and he still was fairly efficient doing it. Put the ball in harm's way a little bit at times, but overall, he was an efficient quarterback in a lot of his throws. I'd say probably 80% of them were over in the same area, and teams knew that. And the offense was still able to move efficiently. With Brock Purdy, I'm curious to see if they start to try to make him do something similar as well. We've seen his tendency of kind of flushing out to the left. Even sometimes when there's a clean pocket, they start to try to do things to bottle him up to make him feel uncomfortable. We won't know those things until the season starts. But overall, I'd say the practices so far I've been to with Brock Purdy out there haven't been super encouraging. Not necessarily like too bad. I think he's more of a gamer, and I think if you look at it through the lens of that, I think you're fine with it.
Eric Crocker here on the Morning Rush on 95.7 The Game. I just saw a bold proclamation from Damian Woody on ESPN saying his bold proclamation was Sam Darnold was going to lead the Niners to the Super Bowl. Now, the practices I went to, Crocky, last week, Darnold looked good. But again, there was no pads on. There was no hitting going on. The practice you went to, I believe he was 2 of 6. What do you think about the prospects of Sam Darnold? What did you see from Sam Darnold at practice when you were out there?
Yeah, I have seen him a few times now.
Okay.
And I would say he's been fairly consistent. The ball looks good coming out of his hand. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we'll look at those completion percentages and all that, and I try not to make too much of a stink about it. Ultimately, it's hard to judge how good or bad someone is doing off of, the percentages from practice, and I know those kind of float around, especially social media. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, Kyle is looking at, how's the guy just executing his offense? Is he making the right decisions? Is he making the right reads? And if so, he puts more stock into that than like a completion percentage. As far as Sam Darnold goes and being able to lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl, if you want to say that Sam has been in bad situations and maybe his clock has been sped up because offensive lines haven't been great, maybe he hasn't consistently had like the best weapons or a great ideal situation for him, then I guess you could say, 49ers is a great opportunity for him to turn things around and be really good. I'd say the evidence as it pertains to Sam Darnold in his 55-plus games that he has started is not good and not encouraging. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'd go out and say that, but right. You did say it was a bold prediction, and that's probably as bold as it gets.
No, I did like the anticipation from a couple throws that he made, and you could see the zip, you see the size in the pocket, and there is something to be said about being in a situation to where you have all these weapons with Debo and Brendan Ayuk and George Kittle and, of course, Christian McCaffrey and an elite play caller in Kyle Shanahan. So maybe there is a reclamation project there. But what does that mean? Do you honestly see the Niners keeping Brock, Trey, and Darnold? Because you do have Brendan Allen as your fourth-string quarterback. A lot of us are scratching our heads over that one. Do you think one of these guys could be on the move here in the next couple weeks?
I think that there could be a guy on the move. If Trey Lance continues to trend in the direction he's trending at, I think you're more than comfortable with him being your QB2. And if that's the case, then there's no need for either Sam Darnold or Trey Lance. Now, I don't know how Kyle Shanahan's viewing this. Again, you talked about some of the things that Sam Darnold has done in practice. And, Woody said, starting quarterback leading the 49ers to the Super Bowl. I don't know about that. But if you're saying, hey, Sam Darnold right now is your QB2 based off what you've seen from practice, I would say, hey, man, that's a pretty good QB2. So then it comes down to, well, do we need 2 legit QB2s on this roster? And is there value in one of those guys to be able to move them? And I would say there probably would be more value in Trey Lance, who you can, pull the whole fifth-year option card next year. So if Trey Lance, let's say, he continues to do well through camp, he shines against the Raiders during the joint practices next week, he kills it in preseason, and that is more value for you to move him and recoup something from him if maybe there's an injury elsewhere. I know 49ers fans don't want to hear that, especially after last season where the 49ers went through so many different quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it sounds like they kind of like Brandon Allen as well, and I know a lot of people view him as an afterthought. Man, why is he getting reps? I'm like, well, he was a QB2 for years in Cincinnati. So there's some value there with him as a backup as well. You got 3 guys that you like, you definitely can move on from one of those guys, especially to have value. And I would assume Trey Lance, if he does well, would have the most value of the backup quarterback.
Talking to Eric Crocker here, Locked On 49ers podcast, former NFL DB. And Eric, you just mentioned it. week away from joint practices with the Raiders next week in Henderson, Nevada. A guy I would like to see there is Nick Bosa. Are you getting a little worried here, Eric, with this as the longer it lingers about Nick Bosa not being a part of practices? I would love to see him at joint practices going up against his old buddy, Jimmy Garoppolo. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, okay, so here's the thing with Nick Bosa. I'm not worried about the contract getting done. I think we all know that at some point, Parag and John Lynch, they'll make sure that happens. And by week one, heading up there in Pittsburgh, you will see Nick Bosa on the field. My biggest thing is just from a professional standpoint, you're flipping that switch and going 1,000 miles an hour is extremely difficult on your body. He'll be in shape. He'll be ready. He'll be strong. We know all of that. But being in game shape and being in a position to where now all of a sudden, you're on the field for 70-plus plays or whatever it might be, that's kind of difficult on your body. And that's a lot of times when you see, like, soft tissue injuries and things like that. So I'm not worried about the deal getting done, and I don't doubt at all he'll be on the field week one. But the opening that window for that soft tissue injury and something that might linger throughout the year, I'm more concerned about that. So you need practice. You don't even necessarily need preseason, but even doing drills, right, when they do the bag drills, the get-off drills in practice, and you're competing against somebody else trying to get out faster than him, that's starting to push your body. That's ramping your body up. And then the practices, that helps as well. That all helps you get ready for week one, even if you don't even participate in a preseason game. So him being away and not having that opportunity, that worries me more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Eric Crocker. Eric Crocker here on the Morning Roast. Steve Wilkes in his defense. We saw D'Amico Ryans. We saw Robert Saleh. Very good defenses. Robert Saleh didn't have to blitz as much because he had that strong front four. D'Amico, the same thing here. Feels like, just from what I saw him line up for Fred Warner as an outside linebacker at times, coming off the edge. It feels like Steve Wilkes may be a bit more aggressive with his defensive philosophy. What do you know about Steve Wilkes? What did you see from Steve Wilkes in practice so far with his defense?
When a new defensive coordinator comes in and the year starts, they all say the same thing, like, want to be this aggressive, attacking defense. And we heard it from Saleh, we heard it from D'Amico Ryans, and you could say maybe they could have been a little bit more aggressive with him, but hey, maybe they didn't have to because the front four got to.
Right.
I'd say Wilkes, so far from what we've seen, has probably been the most aggressive of the coaches, and really kind of backing up with that talk with saying, hey, we're going to be more aggressive with what we're doing. I went back and watched some of the Panthers film, and there was probably a lot more off coverage than you would typically see. And with the off coverage, you typically don't see as many blitzes. But I'm curious to see, do those guys start lining up a little bit more impressed, being more aggressive there, sending guys off the edge? He had Miles Hartsfield, who came over, and now he's with the 49ers, came over from Carolina. He was their primary nickel guy. He blitzed a lot as well. Well, the 49ers continue to do that with, like, Isaiah Oliver. So we're starting to see a little bit more. And I say blitzes, that's just sending somebody else. I guess technically a blitz, if you're only sending 4, then it's not a blitz, even if somebody's coming off the edge. But then you're dropping guys like, and we've seen Drake Jackson dropping the coverage a couple of times now. There was one time where he was covering Elijah Mitchell down the field. I mean, that was probably one of the most impressive plays of preseason or training camp so far. But they are sending pressure in different ways, and I'm curious to see how that starts to mirror with the back end of the defense.
So one of the big question marks for the 49ers this year, obviously, offensive line. That's a big thing. A big question mark, right tackle Mike McGlinchey going over to Denver. You got big Trent Williams. In the past, the question mark with this team has probably been the secondary. Where are you at right now with this 49ers secondary group, and specifically Talanoa Hufanga, who came off an all-pro, first-team all-pro season last year, him building off of that going into this next season?
So I think one thing that I've always been able to hang my hat on with the 49ers defense is, man, these guys are really coached up. I do think they lack the high-end talent guys, but they have enough guys that just do their jobs and do what they're supposed to do that make it work. Who's kind of that speedy guy that can run with any type of receiver? I don't think they really have that kind of guy. Now, you do have Travarius Ward. They pay a lot of money to him. I think he's best when they put him up and press against opposing teams, wide receiver ones, and say, hey, just be aggressive with this guy, slow him down. He competes at a high level doing that. But playing off in a lot of what I saw from Will's defense with the Panthers, I think that can become potentially a little problematic with these guys especially Travarius Ward. I don't think Travarius Ward is the best turn and run guy. So having to play off, anticipate, and then turn and run with guys that are pushing full speed at him, that's where you can kind of get behind him a little bit. He also dealt with some injuries last year, so you have to take that into account. Maybe those things lingered throughout the second half of the season, and that's why I saw guys kind of get behind him a little bit. But I'd say this team, the defense in general, has to rely a little bit more on scheme than they do just, oh, man, we just have the most talented guy in the secondary. And it feels like they do that a lot, especially offensively.
Right.
I don't think anybody's thinking Brock Purdy's the most talented guy ever, but, hey, man, you rely on that scheme and the players around them, everything comes together. And I'd say you probably say the same thing for their secondary as well.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's interesting, too, because they got some big boys on that schedule when it comes to the wide receiver position, Crocky, and you know it all too well. George Pickens, week one against Pittsburgh. You got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase coming to town. Week 2, Cooper Kupp with the L.A. Rams. So, yeah, now the secondary will get tested, but it's going to be a lot of fun to see it. How long y'all here in the Bay, Crocky? Because I know you're in Arkansas, right?
Yeah, I live in Arkansas. I got a home out there, but I'll probably be out here throughout training camp and the start of preseason.
All right, we'll definitely do it again. Maybe we'll even try to get you to the studio, but that's a tough drive down in the Santa Clara. We won't do that to you, man. But we'll definitely do it again and talk to you. We enjoy the coverage as always.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. Eric Crocker, man, does a hell of a job covering the 49ers, man. Former player, knows what it's like to be a pro, played in the Arena League. So you got to respect his analysis there when it comes to defense, offense, everything.